Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Ultimately, leaders are going to have to really look at their organization. And I think we'll get to this, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but really focus on cultures, really focus on, there's a lot of lip service talking about a people first or a people forward organization. To make that happen really is going to be a challenge because our organizations have been bureaucratic, hierarchical. We still have a lot of work to go with diversity and inclusion and equity, and people are struggling with recruitment and retention. And even leadership development. So there's so much on the plate. There's so many different priorities. The pandemic pulled the curtain back and exposed, no matter how good anybody was, it said, you weren't that good. You weren't ready for what was going to happen going forward. So I think the role of leadership is going to really be helping people adapt to all the changes that are happening.
Yes. Wow. I'm loving what you're saying because COVID did expose a lot of people and expose a lot of businesses as well. And I think, so my actual company that I actually own is called Leading Change Partners. And we get in with organizations and partner with them to lead change. In other words, lead change with them amongst themselves as leaders and the employees as an organization, but also lead change in business and in the industry and market. One thing for you to go through change and experience that. Another thing is to go actually lead it as well. And it's a different thing. And I think you're so right what you're saying. COVID has exposed people, and some people have had to go now and change and upskill themselves into other things or pivot, adapt, whatever you want to call it. And they've had to go and do it. And it's been amazing to see the different stories coming through, Ira, and those who have gone off and exploded and gone and done something different in life. And I just think that's just wonderful. Sometimes something like a pandemic or a global financial crisis or anything like that can be the catalyst for us to see change and see people moving forward.
Yeah, every day I'm in a conversation with somebody who can't wait. It's either the question to me or their context is that when do you think we're going to get back to normal? And one is we're not. And normal also, it's an interesting conversation. And I hadn't thought about it until the pandemic and people started talking about normal. What was normal for you're in New Zealand, I'm in Pennsylvania. We came from different backgrounds. What our experiences in life, that was our normal, but it wasn't universal. I know best what it was like to live in the U.S. Normal in the United States pre-1960, there was only 1/3 of working age women were working, and sometimes they weren't allowed to work. Women didn't go to college. Women weren't allowed to open a bank account without their husband's permission. We can get into race. If you were a person of color up through the 1960s, you weren't allowed to go to the same restaurants, the same schools, the same hotels, but that was normal. That was normal for our grandparents. That was more. My question is that the normal you want to go back to? And there are some distorted people that may want to go back to that. But as a whole, that's not what people want, regardless of your race or age or gender or ethnicity. Nobody really wants to go back to that. But that's what we think of normal. But the other part of normal is that I just heard this great definition the other day. And normal is a state of mind where you don't want to see anything change.
Yeah, perfect.
And that's just not going to happen anymore. But not only are things going to change, they're going to accelerate. And you might be familiar, some of your listeners might be familiar with Ray Kurzweil or Singularity University. Kurzweil is the, I think, chief engineer officer at Google, or at least he was. But he talks about the accelerating rate of change, and he has the 10-year rule. And the 10-year rule is similar to Moore's law, which was the computer chip rule, that every 18 months, the rate of processing speed would double. Well, the law of acceleration from Kurzweil was that every 10 years, the pace of change would double, which means that in 2022 that we're in now, if you roll the clock forward into 2042, then everything that occurred in the year of 2020, all the way from in the US, an election, a pandemic, wildfires, climate change, and in many other countries, social unrest. Many of those were global. That what occurred in 12 months will occur in 3 months. It's terrifying if you think about it, all those events. And then in another 20 years after that, so 40 years from now, all the change that we're experiencing is going to occur like every 11 days. And that's not exact science, but it hopefully gets the point across what living on an exponential curve feels like. We're not ready for that. We're not accustomed to that. We want to go back that there's some predictability, some routine. We want to slow it down. We're not going to be able to slow down the change, no matter what it is at this point, but we can certainly become better at responding and managing the change, managing our response to change. That's, to me, the role of what leadership is going to be going forward. The people that we're going to remember in 20 or 30 years from now, and maybe as an older baby boomer, I won't be around to remember that. But what other people I think are going to be citing as the great leaders of today are going to be the people who helped humanity get through this, and not through handouts, but teaching them how to respond better to an accelerating rate of change.
Yep. Very good. I totally agree. I think that's some wonderful stuff that you're sharing there. Now, Ira, who is your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
I'm going to hedge on that one. I've got many, and I think I used to have a pat answer, and then they were all taken out of context. My favorite leaders are many. I've got favorite coaches, sports coaches. I've got one of my favorites who I follow. I still like his philosophy is Warren Bennis, Benis. More consultant than CEO or a coach or an individual. We were just talking before, like your dad, someone who 80 years old, continues to set an example, do his own thing, has a quality of life. My mother, we got relatives, we know people. My favorite leaders isn't necessarily an individual person. It's a person who's led a moral life, an ethical life, has helped community, has humility. It's not necessarily a person that we can recognize by name. It's going back to the Good to Great book. Many of the people in there, the best people, the best leaders, weren't people we ever heard about. They weren't the people on the front lines. So my favorite leader isn't necessarily an individual person. It's just a person who has not even necessarily come up from the ashes, but someone who has really led other people, helped other people. One of the terms we talk about today is co-elevating people, but had a humility about them, led a good life. And at the end of the day, they were measured not how many dollars they had in their bank account or what their compensation was, but by how many people that they helped and touched.
Mm-hmm. I think it's about the influence they've had on others and having values and being strong and dependable and consistent. And I love what you say there too, because you're so right. There are so many people out there. You don't have to be famous. There are people who are out there having influence on others for sure. Ira, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. And when I say that title or that statement, what does that mean for you?
Wow, I think it just goes back to what I shared earlier. Leadership, at least going forward, is about change. It's helping people, whether it's more than changing their business model, it's more than building an organization that is going to respond, identify what their future customers are. It's more than just business. Leadership is changing hopefully in a good way, that it is going to be more people focused, whether it's people, as I said, there's a lot of terms out there, people forward, people first, but it's going to be people focused, and hopefully leadership, it's going to really finally be more about compassion and empathy and co-working. And you may have the title of leader, but everybody, at least many people put their pants on one leg at a time, and what other terms you want to use. But leadership hopefully is going to be about helping people adapt to a future and help create an environment and provide the skills that will help people have an opportunity to grow and to thrive. Doesn't mean everybody's going to take it, but at least you're an equal opportunity provider in giving people an equal opportunity to grow if they choose, and give them the support and tools that they need.
Who's your favorite leader and why?
That's an interesting question, because I actually don't have any specific person in mind, someone that I could name, nor do I think that something like a favorite leader or favorite leadership person exists or should exist, right? Having a favorite leader that kind of implies I want to or would want to imitate that person, right? Or adopt some characteristics of that person. So I can get inspired from different famous people, of course, but I don't think I have a favorite leader. Leadership, in my view, is something that everyone practices in a way, and it's very unique to one's personality. So like prominent leaders, I don't know, like Barack Obama or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos from Amazon, they're seen as great leaders generally, right? But I think that they follow their unique and authentic style. That's what makes them so prominent in terms of their leadership. And that's why I rather would say that my favorite leader is myself. I have my style of, obviously I learn as I go, right? But I have my unique style and my unique, leadership at the end.
Yeah, very good. All right, thank you for that. Leadership Has Changed is the name of this show. That's the title. When I say the title or that statement, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, if you look at this, traditionally, leaders are building on their experience and their skills to drive them and inspire people to, in the end, trigger performance and change. But also leaders, they used to be linked primarily to, as I said before, to the position or the role they have in the organization. So you were able to just look at the organizational hierarchy and you knew exactly who should be considered a leader, and the rest were like followers. Right? And today's leadership structures, they're not that hierarchical anymore. While, of course, people at the top of the organizations, they should have the characteristics of a leader and all these different characteristics that we are familiar with. But as I mentioned before, there are now leaders at almost any level. And even if they haven't been given that fancy title or rank. So it means one must to really distinguish leadership from authority. So you can be a leader without authority nowadays. But when it comes to how the characteristics of leadership have changed, so coming back to your question or how that's actually changing, I think we must also acknowledge that today's world became much more dynamic and more disruptive, definitely way more than ever before. And that trend will obviously continue. And those aspects actually have an impact on how leadership is being carried out. So there's frequent change, right? The message changes constantly. And we have seen that especially with COVID-19, right? With the pandemic. So what was valid yesterday, that might become obsolete the next day. So it's very fast, right? And it has an impact on decision-making and judgment, etc. So leaders have to become more flexible and may change directions much faster than they used to do that. And that's based obviously on changed conditions. And that before has been seen as, that person has like constantly changing mind or doesn't know, or it's inconsistent, etc. But that's actually the normal today. Everything is changing much faster. So it also means that leaders need to have a different relationship to failure in the end. So coming back to projects, and we know that projects are failing a lot, but it also has some impact on leadership and how actually leaders behave or their behaviors, right? As leaders, we have to admit also our mistakes and be more transparent and truthful, because again, there's a data-driven world out today, right? You find everything on the internet. Organizations that cannot lie anymore, they cannot hide anything anymore because it's all transparent. It's all out there. It's the same for leaders and organizations. You have to be more transparent and truthful, because otherwise, anyway, it gets discovered in a data-driven world. Obviously not directly on social media, but that's a data-driven world also inside organizations. But primarily, it's also to inspire and lead by example, right? So when leadership is more open and also open to failure and being more transparent on, I have done a mistake, I'm wrong here, and I learn actually from other people, then this inspires people also and adopt the same practices. So someone needs to allow to be challenged and, as I said, to listen to people and listen to information and also external sources like data. That's a link to data analytics and AI, etc.
Yeah, they're good points, very good points. And I like what you're saying about leaders needing to be more flexible, but then also having a different relationship with failure and being open to failure. I like that because if they're more open to it, then they're going to take more risks and go out there, but also they're going to move faster rather than being procrastinating. But then they're not going to get things right. And then, of course, as you said, they need to be a little bit more transparent, own the problem, get it sorted and move on, which I think is really important.
I started my career way back in 1987, straight from school into IT. I joined the civil service at the time, what was the DHSS, Department of Health and Social Security, within the UK. And actually in 2000, we were outsourced. EDS, a global leader in outsourcing from America, who had business all over the world, invested heavily and took on some outsourcing contracts from the UK government. I've never looked back since the outsourcing. It was a fantastic opportunity that I didn't go looking for, but set me up for the future.
No, that's excellent. And David, tell me, so when you did that, what I'm actually really quite interested in is hearing about your journey. How did you get into leadership?
By accident, actually. Yeah.
Ah,
I was a technical architect on some large scale programs. Thought I was destined to be a technical architect for all my life. It was a great job. You drew big pictures. You guided people through what we needed to build and solve problems. But my leaders at the time, my general managers, client executives, they saw something in me and they said, "You're going to be the next general manager for Program Y." It filled me with awe at the time. I was excited, but I thought, I can't do that. What do you want me to do that for? That involves finance and P&L and all that sort of stuff. What a difference from an architect's role.
yeah, yeah. And so when you thought that you couldn't do that kind of thing, what was one thing that you may have done or to help you actually feel a bit more comfortable in taking on that role and then going ahead with it?
At first, I was starting to sink, but not realizing I was sinking.
Mm.
But actually, the big step forward was some coaching, which is actually where we met way back 2005, 2006. The company offered some transformational leadership coaching to up and coming stars. And I guess on reflection, that changed my perception of how to do big jobs, big roles. And the coaching certainly set me up for the future.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it sounds like you would highly recommend somebody getting a coach and helping them through things?
Every day, even more important these days, especially for complex jobs or any leadership job. I would highly recommend it to anybody starting a career to find a mentor or a coach as quickly as possible and go for different coaches, different mentors, and use that to build your experience and knowledge and how to learn.
Yeah, and build your toolkit probably. In other words, knowing what to go to when you need to go to as a leader around skills, experiences, and so forth.
Absolutely. And look around you and at leaders who you think are good and understand their good traits and their bad traits. Look at
Sure.
bad leaders and make sure their bad traits don't get reflected into your leadership style.
Excellent. So, David, the question I've got for you here is to actually understand from you. I'm sure you may have many. Who's your one favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. So, who's your favorite leader and why?
I'm going to go with Steve Jobs from Apple. When he was around, he changed the world. I'm told he was difficult to work with at times, but he built very strong teams around him. He had passion and complete focus on perfection. And actually, his legacy around what he's left in terms of market and product, the iPhones changed the world. The way we interact with each other, the way we interact with social media. Who would have thought in the 90s that would have become the way we run our lives effectively? Everything from banking to music to looking at videos and all sorts of stuff.
It's amazing. Yeah, it really does run our lives. And we run our lives through it, but it also actually runs our lives. And then also we can run businesses, whole businesses through that phone. And it wasn't as if he or the company designed phones. We already had phones, but they just brought it out in a different way that was more appealing to people. And I think also they're very good at how they market the product to the industry or to the market, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can go on YouTube these days and still see the first launch with him on the stage presenting that. And it's still inspiring.
Yeah.
Still going to learn from that. Any product company that can still look at how Apple launched things back in the day and today. I feel it was better back in the day than now. But yeah, what an inspiring leader.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, so the show is called Leadership is Changing. And when I say that statement, that name, leadership is changing, what does it mean to you?
Adapting and recognizing the change in the world, in the business, in your company, recognizing the employee base, but recognizing more importantly that for businesses to continue to survive, you've got to lead from the front and change direction if required and when it's required and be nimble.
So to continue to survive, you need to lead from the front.
Absolutely. Leadership these days is much more at the front leading as opposed to managing. I think there's a distinction from, we used to have great managers and used to talk about great managers. The language has changed. We're looking for great leaders and people who can actually make a real difference and be very inclusive and humble, but have gravitas at the same time. Gravitas is really important.
Fantastic. Yeah, gravitas. I like that. I like that word. I like that, how you put it as well. For sure, humble and so forth, but with gravitas. Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.